Okay, Bee, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to talk about Bridgerton, specifically season two. Um, we have recorded another podcast episode a couple of weeks ago, which I haven't released yet. But as soon as we came on the call together, Bee was like, I was just finished hate watching Bridgerton. And I was like, oh, tell me more, because I like binged it. I stayed up way too late watching it multiple nights in a row. And we both have many thoughts about it.
Yeah.
So to give some context to this conversation, number one, we are vexed. Number two, I am caffeinated. I don't know about you. And from my perspective, this is not like, when I watch a show like this, my brain just goes into like sex, love, and relationship coach mode. And it's not even really about Bridgerton for me. It's about like all of the themes, cultural narratives, portrayals, the ways that relationship dynamics take place, the ways that certain toxic patterns are glorified or romanticized. So for me, the show's really just a jumping off point to talk about all of these sorts of things. And there's plenty of things that I think are challenging within the show that I don't agree with, but also remember I binged it and I really was into it at the same time. So I'm here with both of that push pull inside of me. How would you characterize how the lens that you are bringing to this conversation?
It is a very unpopular lens. That's how I would characterize it. I have a similar but different lens and experience to you. For me, how do I say this? The reason that I watched it was much more from a curiosity, dissection, analysis, and hate place. And it was like, what is the fuss about? Because I could see how hyped everyone is about it on social media feeds, spaces, etc. And because I had already had the experience of watching a few episodes of season one, and I had to stop because I was so angry with so many of the different dynamics, the interracial relationship, all sorts of things that I found problematic in season one, that I never finished it. And then when I saw the hype for season two, I was like, okay, I'm just going to get in there and have a look and see what this whole mess, this whole thing is about. Because how do I say this? Because when I want to rant about something, I want to be informed about it, and I want to have as much information as possible, as opposed to someone who's unopinionated and just being like, no, I don't care for it. I mean, the fact that I had to stop watching season one is indicative enough. But then I was like, okay, I'm gonna consume this thing and then have my experience with it and see where are the places that, like, why is this so having this reaction for me? Why is it so loved by so many? And what is everyone missing? Like, aren't we in 2022? And why is it that I'm having this visceral aversion to it and this mind-blowing hard limit no about it when everyone else is lapping it up like it's the sexiest, most romantic, smuttiest thing they've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. And I remember saying to you when we first talked about it, like when we mentioned it the last time we were together, I said, it's like hate fucking without orgasms. That's how I experienced watching it. I was like, oh, this is insane. Did he just say that? Did this really just happen? How is this okay? And how is this loved by everyone? But I just had to keep going because I wanted to get to the end.
You had to get that happy ending you deserved.
I mean, we can talk about the like silver. I mean, I don't know. We can talk about silver linings at some stage, but I'm not ready. I'm not there yet.
Oh man. Yeah, it's a ride. There's something else. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention was I'm excited to have this conversation with you because I feel like you have the sight. You have the sight for seeing the ways that relationship dynamics, cultural patterns, things like colonialism, patriarchy, white supremacy, the way that all of these you can kind of like see a situation and you see all of the layers and the dynamics and the patterns playing out within them in a way that not a lot of people can see with the clarity that you do. So I'm really curious to hear. You want to say something to that?
I was going to say that's just really deep recognition, and I'm just wanting to name receiving that and appreciating it, and interestingly, the themes that you pointed out weren't even necessarily my primary perspective or the way that I was looking at it. I mean, the thing that vexed me the most was the interrelationships between people. I mean, yes, the lens of, I don't know, sexism, misogyny, classism, and the strange attempt at racial diversity and inclusion through the casting is definitely something that was in there, but it wasn't the thing that was, vexing me the most. And, the fact that you say that as well reminded me that, and this is connected to one of the whys of me watching it, is there are so many colleagues that you and I have who are relationship therapists, who are marriage therapists, who are, or coaches or etc. in the realm, who are in love with this show and talking about it in their public spaces, and who elevate it and show it off and romanticize it. And I'm like, but you work with couples and relationships and healthy dynamics, and so maybe there's something I'm missing. That was what it brought to me. Like, okay, well, if you think this is great and I respect you and I respect your work, what am I missing about this? And what it left me with is I'm just actually disturbed that these people who I respect and who work with people dating better, more consciously, and having really loving relationships, marriages, partnerships, sex, whatever, are rating this show from what I've seen of it in that perspective, and from that lens of like love and dating. And how are you okay with that being the way people treat each other if they're dating?
Yeah.
When you're a dating coach or a relationship therapist.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that a bit. I would like to start by just getting your raw reaction to this quote. Are you ready?
No. Okay.
I do not need feelings. What I need is what I have, and that is a list. Tolerable, dutiful, suitable enough hips for childbearing, and at least half a brain.
I mean, like, my pussy feels angry. Parts of me go into freeze. I just want to punch the living daylights out of somebody who has that perspective. Yeah. It's interesting because that's actually a quote that I gathered in preparation for this conversation. And it was one of the ones that just drove me insane, the way that he speaks about women and even about Kate. That's a quote from Anthony, for those of you who haven't watched it. Anthony and Kate being
by the way, if you haven't watched it, there may be a few spoilers.
Oh yeah, that's actually really good to note. I don't
know if he actually really likes women. He seems to have a fair amount of disdain for them. What do you think?
Hmm. The thing is, I think so much of what he says when he says quotes like what you shared is some kind of bro conditioning that's being passed on to him, not even
Yeah.
from his father, because his father wasn't like that, but from the
Yeah.
society he's a
Yeah.
part of.
Yeah.
Do I think he's misogynistic? I think he's misled. I think there's probably two parts of him, like I also know the part of him that was deeply in love in season 1 with somebody that he couldn't be with.
Yeah, I forgot
And
about that.
and it shows a different side, a different flavor of his emotional unavailability. He was deeply in love with someone that he could only care for in a certain way, in certain forms, but he couldn't be seen in public with her. He certainly couldn't marry her, and he'd have to leave his life in order to be with her. So he also believes love is pain.
Mm. Mm.
And that's what we find out. Like, we find out the reason and the depths and the whys of it and the hows throughout season 2. And sure, I get that love has been pain for so many people, myself included, but it doesn't excuse his, I don't know, the way that he navigates that and treats the objects of his desire. It doesn't justify it for me. And it's also, I mean, this is, I know I've mentioned this to you, but this is personal to me when there are, when the quotes and the rhetoric about women being good stock and having good childbearing hips and, they need to be tolerable and dutiful, like you say. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we're going to suppress the feminine and make sure that the girl is good and polite and pretty. And she's going to pump kids out for you. That's all she's there for.
Yeah. Well,
and
you
that's
definitely
all her worth and her value.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely see that in the the way that the girls are groomed to find a suitable husband, and the manners, the like level of control they have to have over themselves to behave in just the right way. But I also want to bring this question of how much of what we are objecting to is just the ongoing fucked upness of patriarchy and the culture of high society in that context, and how much of it is in the portrayal that we think there's a way that the portrayal of that particular day and time has issues.
Is that a question you're asking me, or that you're going to
answer? But both of us.
Both of us.
Just dropping it into the conversation, because I think it is really angering to see, let me say that in a less passive way. I get angry seeing the ways that the women have to groom themselves and how limited their options or that their like personal freedom is. But that is also, the anger there is also at like what life would have been like for my ancestors a couple of 100 years ago. And depending on, like we were talking about before, where you live in the world, what your cultural is, what your culture is, what kind of communities you live in, your family culture, this reality may be more or less distant for you. There are people living in 2022 who have similar pressures and restrictions on the way that they live their lives. And for those of us like me who, a white person living in Australia, I can choose who I want to marry and I can choose what I want to do with my career, but these themes play out in more subtle ways. It's not actually like, oh, that's not an issue anymore. It just is like more sneaky.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Yeah, for me, I mean, I know, like you're saying, part of what's angering us is the patriarchy and those societal constructs, and is it that, or is it the portrayal? And for me, it's definitely more about the portrayal. And differently to you, as I've mentioned, these experiences are very alive for me in the way that I grew up in this lifetime, the society I was raised in. I navigated, faced, and met these very limitations and rules about how girls and women are supposed to behave, and what our value is, and what we're worth, and how our virginity is important, and even matters of class, like if people, arranged marriages still happen, and if people were interested in each other. I mean, I know this has changed slightly. Yeah, the way that it's changed differs depending on whether people have immigrated or not, and which Arabic country they're in. But certainly people are still sneaking around, and even if they're not, I remember growing up hearing about and being told about, but where is this person from? What is his family name? What is their class? How much money do they have? What does this family do? Where is their lineage? What is their ancestry? What is their name? So similarly to Bridgerton, it mattered whether you were a Bridgerton or a Featherington, if you were a prospective suitor or courtier, or even just somebody you were friends with or connected with. How do you know them? What's their father's name? What's their background? Which, all of that is still really relevant. I mean, we don't have things like debutante balls and coming out to the seas, and we didn't have that sort of cultural rite of passage, thank goodness. But everything else was suffocating and restricting and limiting and damaging enough for people who didn't feel like they have a choice. And this is the same with Bridgerton, is predominantly women and femmes don't have a choice. And if they make their own way and choose not to get married, whether it's Eloise or Kate, or choose to start their own businesses, goddess forbid, like Madame Lecroix, is that her name?
Delacroix.
Delacroix, thank you. Or be a singer or a performer, then you're considered
like unmarriageable.
Yeah, unworthy. You're kind of, I mean, if you're a performer, then you're kind of you're on the up, but you're sort of out, because then you're probably a whore, quote unquote, and that way of looking at the world and being is still very alive in some parts of the world, definitely in the way that I grew up. And so for me, it's one that networks are choosing to put money into making this really popular and centering it as a conversation piece and as something that's popular in culture. But it's also the way that it's hyped as something that's desirable or favorable or hot. And it's making people, predominantly women and femmes, swoon all over the world that this is like what you should be, I don't know, seeking or looking for. That's the prize. Someone like Anthony, or to be the diamond of the season, or to manipulate your way to get what you want, or to compete against your sisters, biologically or generally, that's, and that it's okay for men to treat you like this if they're courting you or wooing you or dating you. Like, hi, we're in 2022. Let us exalt and celebrate and just reinforce fuckboys of the 1800s, because that makes you think, well, I don't know, what kind of behavior does that make people accept or think is okay when they're comparing it to their own experiences of anything from guys ghosting them on social media to, or, dating apps or whatever, to the way they speak about you to their friends, or if they're flirting with your friends in front of you, or, just reinforcing that harmful pattern, narrative, culture of, oh, he pulled my hair or pinged my bra, so he must like me. He's going to be hot and cold and pull me close and then push me away and state that he wants everything that I'm not. He must like me. This like pickup culture nagging.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and on the flip side, when something like this is hyped and praised and loved, comparing it to or juxtaposing it with shows or stories that are the opposite and that I love, like whether it's vampires or werewolves in a series, if we're talking about True Blood or the originals, or even, I mean, goodness, let's go as trashy as Twilight, the Twilight series and trilogy, not trilogy, however many it was, or the 50 Shades trilogy, whether it's the books or the movies. Those are comparatively shut down in the mainstream or like criticized and judged as wrong. And here's the thing that's interesting about those is the male characters in them are already known to be bad boys, or they're literally not human, or they're not painting themselves to be in a light of we are classy, well-to-do, well-mannered, polite men or folk in our society. You know, they're not
everything a good man aspires to be.
Yeah, they're not painting themselves to be, you know, with that veneer of good, upstanding, moral citizen. Just the it's the hypocrisy of it. It's the double standards, you know. They're already supposed to be bad or damaged or bad boys. And yet the way they treat their love interests, and I mean love interests, I'm not talking about people that they're casually with, is better than the way Anthony treats Kate throughout their entire courtship. It's just, yeah, it's infuriating and it's mind-boggling to me, and it doesn't make any sense that this is uplifted and praised, Bridgerton, whereas you know, shows where it's supposed to be dark and bad and wrong and cheap and trashy, and yet love interests are treated better. And I'm not saying it's not problematic, because there's still similar themes of I don't know, possession and property, and I don't know, women not, there's a lack of feminism for sure.
Being saved by the knight in shining armor.
Being rescued. Yeah, all of that. However, how do I say this? It's named. You know, it's named and it's played with from the characters, and it's also not, it's not shown as perfect, and it doesn't end into some kind of turn into some kind of perfect happy ending fairy tale.
It's not romanticized in the same way. I do it you know, the way that the narrative goes through this season is Anthony and Kate are both like, they kind of want each other, but they push each other away. And it's this thing that you can't have. And they both kind of shut down their emotions and feelings and what they really want. But then in the end, everything's supposed to be all good because they finally break through that and they come together. But look, from my experience, what I know about relationships, they are going to need a lot of therapy or counseling or work, because those patterns, you can turn around and make that decision that you want to marry that person, but those patterns, you like, whoever you are, that follows you into the relationship. And
exactly,
if you approach your whole like dating courtship with that push, pull, avoid, shut down my feelings, you're still going to carry that pattern with you into the marriage or the relationship. It's not going to be all happily ever after just because you decided that you're going to claim you want to be together.
Yeah. I mean, what's going to happen when the honeymoon period is over? what happens when conflict arises.
They'll
Or
be playing croquet and like literally smash the bats at each other.
yeah, or they'll get bored and need to create drama.
Mm.
And you know what you named about the behaviors in courtship? I realized that for me, what Anthony did goes a step further than what you have named. Like for me, it's not just him push pulling and avoiding. I find what he did really abusive. I think
Please
that's
elaborate.
Kate was never privy to the conversations, but the way that he speaks about her to other people, we need to make sure that the sour older witch, the older sister is out of the picture, and, just get that thorn out of my side. And, to speak about someone so vehemently and derogatorily. And even some of the things he says to her, or infers, is like, I can't stand the sight of you. Get away from me. I don't want to be anywhere near you. When he hasn't yet revealed. Yeah, it's contemptuous. It's not like, I want you so much, I need to move away, or this is so overwhelming for me, get away from me because I want you. It's filled with this derogatory, like, you disgust me. That's the kind of, that's how it comes across. And then on top of that, there's a layer of, I'm literally wanting to marry and court your younger sister. I've been courting your younger sister, who I'm trying to marry, who you've been protecting all your life. And while I do this weird push-pull, abusive, get away from me, you thorn, you toxic poison, or whatever it is he's bringing up as his facade or defense mechanism or whatever, I'm literally trying to marry your sister, who couldn't be more opposite than you and who's so innocent. I mean, there's just so many layers of betrayal and confusion there that I don't even know why that's not being named or touched on or like addressed. Even if it's a best friend or a sister, like, imagine it was a sister's boyfriend or a best friend's boyfriend. The minute you're alone in a room together and the person you're mutual isn't there, this person is suddenly being horrible to you. But then underneath that, it turns out he wants you. And then the more that he wants you, the more he solidifies things with your sister or best friend. I mean, what kind of a manipulative, abusive head fuck is that? And in that world where marriage and courtship are not casual, and it's all being seen in the public eye. This is, again, with those families in particular, when her sister was being made the diamond of the season. And so you're having to go to these events where you're in the public, where you're being seen by everyone. Everything you're doing is being watched because, for so many layers, like, her mother was outcast from that society. So you're a foreigner coming in from the outside. These people all dislike you, and they see you as the old maid 6 and 20, as they say, who's only 26 years old. She's just put her out to pasture. She's done, So they're seeing her in that light, and your sister is the diamond of the season, and she's being swept up by Lord Bridgerton. And here he is being a piece of shit to you when no one's looking. It's just nasty to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because, I mean, and you and I have spoken about, I often bring this up when you and I chat, as I bring in the realm of kink. And I know that that's more my wheelhouse than your wheelhouse. But when scenes in BDSM are done that are like edgy or a little bit like, oh, that's bad, but that's really hot, it's usually done by two consensual adults who both agree that this is their kink, whether it's about being spanked while you're bent over your whomever's knee, or writing lines, or being told you're bad and you're going to be punished for it, whatever it is, that's something that both people have agreed on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna, so if you're gonna do degradation, humiliation kink on television, but it's actually not a kink and it's being disguised as love, then that makes my stomach turn in so many different unpleasant ways. And then to turn around after all that and be like, psych, it was just my trauma, and like, I want to marry you and stuff.
It is a head fuck, isn't it? And
then the pain that he has caused between two sisters. And it's not to say that that relationship wasn't problematic and they have their own shit, but the way that it all comes out and the heartbreak and the division between those two girls that have known nothing but each other apart from their mother all their lives. And also another lens, I didn't realize that this was going to come up for me, but it has, both with the younger sister Edwina and Daphne, is how betrayed they are by their innocence in a world where they're not allowed to learn what they need to learn to be empowered and make their own choices. Like, so many times I found myself thinking, how can she be so blind, Edwina, about what's happening? And when you're being bred and groomed to be pretty and smart and talented, and dance and learn languages and play the piano, instead of being connected to your body and knowing what sex is, and connected to your intuition, how would you notice if two people had sparks flying between them across a room?
Yeah. Because you've been coded to follow these societal rules and expectations so firmly, you kind of lose that animal instinct, don't you? If you focus so much on what's the right move to make and what isn't correct behavior, and how these things should play out, what the dance moves are.
Yeah. And if that part of you has never been awakened or opened, and the person in front of you, like, let's say I'm Edwina and the person in front of me is Lord Bridgerton, and he happens to be the projection of my list. He is all these things. He is smart. He is of good family. He is going to give me A, B, C, whatever. We like same but different things. He's my romanticized ideal. And he's saying all the perfect things. And he actually is into me. Oh my goodness.
How lucky.
How lucky am I? And why would I even notice that he doesn't look at me like with love or desire or lust or hunger or passion or a deep curiosity to truly know me, instead of asking me questions that are checking off his list?
Well, there's no, also in the way that they portray that time, there's no guarantee that this was part of the discussion throughout the series, right? Is a love match versus like a suitable match. There's no even guarantee that love is going to be, you're going to even get that.
Yeah. Yes. And it's considered a rarity and it's not as important. And you're just lucky if that happens. But the pivotal point is she loves him. Edwina loves or loved Lord Bridgerton, Anthony. And she, for the lack of not knowing any better or not knowing how that would feel, believed that was mutual. Or believed that that's the way that he loved someone. Whereas someone like you or me, when somebody is talking with us or flirting with us, we probably have a level of knowing or connection in our body of, this person wants something from me, or this person is interested in me in a casual way, or just because they're bored or whatever, or this person is genuinely interested in me as a person, irrelevant of what context. Like, we know that feeling of when someone looks at us because we fit, everything's fine, versus this person is all about me.
Yeah, it's not about the gesture of someone giving you flowers or taking you out to dinner. It's in the connection and like body language and the way that they treat you and the way that you feel and the way that they show interest and genuine curiosity about you and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, or even just the, primary facet of, is there chemistry here or is there not?
Yeah.
And she didn't know any better. She was just like, oh, this just fits all the boxes and this is love. That innocent, naive version of it. Something else I wanted to name is comparatively, when I think of Anthony versus Kate in that whole dynamic, the way it played out in the series, I don't know about the books. I know there's 8 of them. And like 50 Shades of Grey, there may be way more nuance and complexity and room for kind of understanding or forgiveness in the books versus the way that has been translated to screen. But as per season 2, compared to Anthony, Kate is voiceless. We don't really hear how she feels about him.
Yeah, that's true. She gets in a few like snide remarks or like sassy remarks to him, but we don't actually see a lot of her inner world and how she feels.
Absolutely not. We know how she feels in terms of aversion and disdain towards him because of what he said about women, and she's trying to protect her sister. We know it from that perspective. But when it comes to her, how she feels about him in the entity that is those two, she is voiceless and speechless. And the way she operates as a character or has been written is all in reaction to him. The way she breathes, the way she moves, her eyes back and forth. But we know all these quotes that he says about her or to her or how he feels. There's so many, but I know you want to drop some.
You do have a background in acting as well. I think that's useful to that's playing, you pick up on things, you notice things in the way that the body language or the way that they play things out on the screen. I think one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is one of the things that like gets me the most, and it gets me because it kind of like tugs at my own stuff from the past, as well as just what I think is an issue, but just seeing the way that it romanticizes being the one person who can get through to an emotionally unavailable man. And also the way it romanticizes getting the man who then will give you the money, the security, the beautiful things, the man who knows how to pleasure you, and then he'll give all of that to you. And that there is like, they try to subvert the knight in shining armor, Prince Charming narrative a bit, but at the end of the day, they have Kate's riding a horse too. She's really good at riding horses. He's not just the knight on horseback, even though he does, he chases her and then he does save her on horseback at the end of the day. But it bugs me the way that it's romanticized. All of that he is. And I not in my current relationship, but I can relate to like wanting to be the one who can get through to someone, or like feeling that like why is it portrayed as attractive for a man to be emotionally unavailable, out of touch with his feelings, guarding his heart? That and of course there are plenty of people who experience that in their life. That is, there's always reasons why people are out of touch with their feelings, or emotionally guarded, or not available for vulnerability and connection. And we can have a lot of compassion for that, but also not glorify it.
Yeah. Yep. And I, similarly to you, and this is, one of the reasons that this show vexes me so much, or the most, is it is, like you say, glorifying, reinforcing, perpetuating this very pattern, which also, take it away from the cultural and the social and the stuff I grew up with. But it's also, this is another pattern that I have spent most of my adult life, and I'm still working on dismantling and rewiring, is that man in the tower, that emotionally unavailable or wounded or damaged, whatever man. And stereotypically, here we go with this archetype of like, I do not need feelings, or no one can get in here, or love isn't important, or I have so
more
hurt.
important things to do. I have duties and responsibilities.
Yeah. Or like, I'm so hurt, I will never let love in, that whole thing. And then femmes or women or people who are on the opposite end of that spectrum, if we're going to call that avoidant, then, the insecure attachment or preoccupied, or preoccupied avoidant, it activates that need to get in there and close the gap, right? But the thing for me that's like specifically damaging in this context when it comes to Bridgerton and then women and femmes is that it also like wakes up and feeds that be the diamond of the season. Be so special and so good and love him so much and heal and save him so much that then he will burst out of his fort and he'll save you right back and sweep you off into the sunset where he hasn't taken anyone before, or not since 10 years ago when he lost his first love, wife, whatever, insert nuances of the story here.
Yeah. So if you think that the show is only about the 1800s, think about this dynamic and how that plays out in our culture now.
It still does. I mean, to me, it's more dangerous than Disney, or if not as dangerous as Disney romances, where you have this pattern playing out in one way or another. He saves her, or she is far away, or he is far away. And then, but it's adults. So it's kind of normalizing and justifying and glorifying it, like you say.
And the thing that also gets me is I did, despite like looking at it and going, in my actual real life, I would not want to be with Anthony. That would be a disaster of a relationship. It would not be healthy. It would be toxic. But the sexual tension that builds over those episodes, and the like wanting and not having, but then finally getting it. There's something about that did turn me on. Even erotic. Though it was erotic, even though I didn't want it to. And I wouldn't, it's not like what I would, it just is what it is. But it made me think a lot about Esther Perel's work, and how she talks about how in a healthy relationship, if you want both the eroticism, the sexual connection, the chemistry, and you want the love and the security, those two things they kind of require opposites. That she calls it a paradox to be managed, because which I love, rather than a problem to solve, there is no, like, they require opposite things.
Yeah.
The eroticism requires a bit of mystery or danger or uncertainty. There's like some space and there's no guarantee there. But the love and the deep connection does require a sense of safety or a degree of safety and security. And those things are kind of diametrically opposed. And I feel like what they have in their dynamic is all of the mystery and the danger and the uncertainty, and therefore a high level of eroticism, of erotic charge between them, but not necessarily a lot of the safety or the security. Yeah. And so I definitely felt that eroticism and enjoyed that aspect of watching it at the same time as going like, that's not what I would actually want for my own relationship. But then it makes it, I'm always thinking about this question of like, how can you find play with a bit of distance or a bit of mystery or a bit of something in the mix to have that eroticism within the container of a healthy, connected relationship.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and you've named it so beautifully. Like, what you noticed is the eroticism, excuse me, the eroticism that you experienced around the tension and the distance and the interplay, not the person, not the relationship, not how he created that eroticism and distance, and not how he created that tension. So that's what I'm hearing, which to me is very different and very healthy. However, people who are watching it might not necessarily have that discernment, or might merge those two things. If that's if that's the eroticism that I want when I experience this behavior in real life, oh my goodness, it's lighting me up. I'm wet. Like, what do I do with this? This must be the person that, love him the right way, give him the right circumstances. He's going to turn around.
I can fix him.
He's going to turn around
and not a fun project for me.
And not marry my best friend. Yeah. Fun project.
And it codes the opposite, right? Like sometimes if you get that imprinting that this is what love looks like, that it's the hot and cold, or the, then when you actually get someone who shows up more reliable, more consistently kind and loving, that can feel a bit like, I feel like there's something wrong here because I'm not feeling these like intense sparks.
I'm not getting the chaos. Where is the chaos and the uncertainty? And like you mentioned, as per Esther Perel, we need both, right? Yeah. And, I know we haven't gotten into this, but we mentioned it before we started recording when we talk about erotic blueprints. There's also the noticing that, or the connection that eroticism you experience is connected to the energetic blueprint, which is something that I understand is quite alive for you, and the sensual blueprint.
Yeah. So
because the touches and the smell, and I know it's like, whew.
I was telling Bee before we recorded that if you're not familiar with the erotic blueprints, it's the work of a woman called Jaya. And I think of it kind of like the love languages, but for your erotic language. There's energetic, sensual, kinky. There's shapeshifter, who's a bit of everything. Which one am I forgetting?
Sexual.
Sexual. It's not my primary. And so it's kind of like the different flavors of eroticism that particularly turn you on. And I am quite strongly energetic and sensual. And so all of those scenes where there's like, they're like close but not quite touching, or there's like a little bit of breath on the neck, or just a little like, do you remember that scene where they walk past each other and their hands like nearly touch but not quite?
Yeah.
Just all of those little so close, like the promise of touch, but it's happening in the space between, that I know I I just get like, whew.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, my primary prints are energetic and kinky, and the rest follow pretty closely. So I completely understand that. And I also want to reflect that this energetic blueprint was built on throughout the season. Right? So here's one of the reasons again that I'm frustrated and angry with and like feel manipulated by this show is stereotype, but most assigned female at birth women, people who've been raised as women, femmes, they're more likely to have energetic blueprint as one of their primary prints. So this series primes them to be like, whoo, all hot and bothered with this, like, maybe he will, maybe he won't. Oh my gosh, he nearly touched me. And then it just keeps building. And we're gonna be in the same room. What's he gonna say?
Yeah.
You are the bane of my existence. Oh my gosh, which is like, you're all built up, hot and bothered, and then he spanks you by telling you something that's like really nasty. And
it's so vexing.
Deeply vexing. So you know, it's so what a cocktail mix of all these like different things that play against each other and add to each other, and can be really confusing for someone who isn't aware of all this.
Yeah.
And what was I gonna say? There's so much goodness here.
I know.
Maybe it was something about Esther Perel in relationships, that there's not really a healthy portrayal of that balance in the mainstream.
Of the balance between
love, safety.
Yeah.
And the
danger
that and excitement and eroticism.
Yeah, we don't have good models for that. And that is something that I like crave.
Yeah.
Seeing how options for ways that you can play with that paradox. And I think there are definitely things you can do. I think trying new things together, or like my partner's been going away for work a lot, and I actually quite like it. I mean, he went away a lot, and then by the end of, he's been gone a lot, and then the last trip I was like, that's enough, you can come back now. But I'm like, enjoy having my space and doing things my way. And then he comes home and I'm like, oh, I'm excited to see you again. We also both work from home. We see each other a lot.
Yeah.
But
creating that distance.
Yeah. But I'm always looking for ways to play with that. That don't sacrifice the goodness of the relationship for the sake of some mystery and danger.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm deeply I feel so betrayed by this show. And, as we're speaking, it's now making me think of shows where there's much better role modeling of this, where there is excitement and danger, but the relationship is actually really solid.
Which ones do you recommend?
Discovery of Witches is one of them.
I don't even know what this is, but it sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, I believe it's 3 seasons. There's a lot there. And Outlander, which is probably very well known amongst.
I have been listening to the audiobook of the first Outlander book.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Jamie and Claire.
Okay. But no spoilers, because I haven't even finished the first book.
None.
Okay.
0.
Okay.
But, in saying that, something I have to name because I'm aware of, not spoiler related, is I'm noticing that in the series I mentioned, I mean, there'll be more, but they're the 2 that, showed up at the top of my head, is there's a lot of drama and chaos and danger in the lives of those characters. So that's a part of where that comes from, and people needing to keep each other safe and rescue each other, not one-sided. And yet And there is a lot of like, there can be a lot of, will it happen? Won't it happen?
Yeah.
What's going to happen next because of everything else in the relationship? But the relationship itself is healthy, you know? So I want to name that. And I want like the point that showed up for me as a like kind of, I don't know, transparency or accountability is noticing that I'm still attracted to a lot of excitement or like chaos, but at least what I'm upholding is, you know, couples or shows where the relationship itself is healthy. And I wonder what happens to those couples when, I mean, I know they're not real, but what happens when their life settles afterwards? How do they keep that excitement and not knowing, you know, what's going to happen next or danger alive?
Yeah, that makes sense. I also, through this conversation, I don't mean to like throw shade on people who experience avoidant attachment or who enjoy the show or who like have a hard time accessing your feelings or who find yourself caught in any of these dynamics. Like, it's not, I don't mean any of this is like a criticism of you as a person. I think it's just important to see these dynamics for what they are and not glamorize them or romanticize them, because we all have our stuff that is ours in this lifetime to live with, work through, you know, be on your journey.
Yeah. I mean, I have both avoidant and I always stumble over the words with this one. Avoidant dismissive on one side and anxious preoccupied. I have both. I have strategies from both. So I'm not, you know, favoring or shaming one over the other. I think it's more, we have those, but then we have the responsibility of how those play out and what we're pedestaling and idolizing and putting up as desired and something that we're aiming towards. What was the other thing you mentioned apart from attachment? I've forgotten already.
Just, I don't remember exactly, but just people's own relationship
loving
stuff.
the show.
Show. I as I mentioned, I binged it, and I was just noticing, like, what is it that is turning me on while I am watching this show? That, because whatever that is good information.
Absolutely.
Whether it's telling me like, maybe I want to play more with those like energetic kinds of like interactions with other people, or maybe it's showing me, it's just like reminding me of that tendency I can have to like want to be the one who can get through to the emotionally unavailable person, and like that's mine to pay attention to. I can't, you can't just like, it's like hard for me to turn off analyzing my own reactions to shows as I watch them.
I love it that you don't. Please don't.
It's just like,
we wouldn't be having this conversation if you did.
I have one other thing that I really wanted to bring up because it shits me. And this is not just a critic. This is like in every show ever that portrays sex. But it is unrealistic for a woman to be conditioned to protect her honor to the degree that she does not even kiss a man, or to like to fully, or, you know, to be so proper and have her whole like sexual side of herself. Like she's obvious, she grooms herself to be sexually attractive to men, but not to like enjoy herself sexually. But then the first time she has sex with a man who knows where her magic button is, not how it works.
Come city stations.
What stations?
Come city. Everyone's coming everywhere.
No, it's not how it works. Like when you shut it,
that works.
This is what I think we talked about this also in the other episode we recorded about religion. When you get these messages for so long that your kind of inherent sexual, sensual nature and expression is not acceptable and you shut it down, it's not just a light switch that you can switch it back on in an instant when you are in circumstances where it is where you are ready to switch it on. Or that's not necessarily how it works for everyone.
Yeah, it's not. And you know, the other layer of that, like for some people, they may be shut down, or they may have been told they need to suppress that side of themselves in the series, you know, because obviously you don't want to look like a whore. You need to look pretty but not slutty. You need to look delectable but not too delicious, because that's just,
you have to be respectable.
Wrong. Yeah, but for the other for many of them, it's also, you know, like I mentioned earlier with Daphne and Edwina, it's not even knowing anything about that side of yourself. Not sex, not what intercourse is, not how babies are conceived, not self-pleasure. I mean, Daphne was told about self-pleasure from, what's his name? Anthony?
No, not her brother.
No, not
Simon.
Anthony. What's his name? Simon.
The Duke.
The Duke. Thank you. Ugh. Yeah.
That's a conversation that would not go down on Bridgerton. Anthony telling his sister about self-pleasure.
The Duke. Yeah, I blanked. I could see his face, and I was like, oh, what's his name? You know, the Duke, yeah, that whole thing. So suddenly there's this realm of yourself, of the world that you don't know about. And either the person who's courting you, the Duke, Simon, tells you, lets you into the doorway, or they'll just bloom you open like a flower on your wedding night when you haven't done any of that or don't know anything about it.
Not how it works, people.
Not how it works. And even Anthony's line in season 2 is like testament to that, when he says, oh, I don't even know if I can say this. You know, when he says, do you even know how many ways a lady can be seduced? The things I could teach you. The things I could teach you. Oh my gosh.
I am the expert on your body. I know your body. I am the one who holds the keys to your queendom.
To your cumdom. But yeah, I mean,
your queendom come.
It's just your kingdom come. Yeah, it's a whole other level of.
Yeah. But so this, when we rant about things like culture gives us unrealistic expectations about how you should have sex or perform in the bedroom or what it should look like, this is where these are the megaphones of culture. These is the vehicles by which culture gives us these messages. It's not an explicit thing. It's just like this is how it's portrayed. You watch enough shows and that's how it's portrayed. And then you get into bed and you're like, what's wrong with me that it's not working like this?
Yeah. And that's how you're programmed. Also, you know, 2022, and yet the messages that Bridgerton are broadcasting on their loudspeakers is men can fuck around, literally. Sleep with as many people as possible, and then they become really knowledgeable on your body if you're sleeping with men, you know, and you're a femme or a woman. And it's not okay for you to do that, because that would make you a slut.
I love the little accent you got when you said that word.
A slut. Yeah, and I know it's just a show and it's fiction, but the fact that it is being placed front and center as, you know, the darling of the season, like Bridgerton is the diamond of the season, for like, women are finding this valuable, and it's making them wet and swoon romantically, and that is problematic.
Like, if you are getting wet and enjoying it, like, enjoy that turn on, figure out what does that show you in terms of like how you can access your own turn on.
Yeah.
and harvest that from it.
Yeah. I guess it's when people aren't unpacking it or talking about
Do you
it
think
the way
that
we are.
you don't think that most people watch this show and then spend hours conversing about the relationship dynamics at the dinner table afterwards?
No, I think that they, reflect on the guys or people they're dating and their dating apps, and they think, guess I'm doing okay after all.
Oh,
they're pushing me away for a reason.
We are.
You sound vexed.
I am vexed. I'm vexed because we haven't. I do want to ask you. I want to, because I know that you will see things that I don't necessarily see. Yeah. If you could speak on your thoughts on the ways that they have tried to bring in more racial diversity to the cast.
So complex.
Give me 2 more hours.
Right. Yeah, I mean, let's see. How can I speak about a couple of specific things that would be very all-encompassing? I'll do my best. I mean, in season 1, how do I say this? The glorification and fetishization of the Duke of Simon I found it really distasteful, especially when I would see the way people were commenting about it online. And it brings up a lot of pain for Black women also. Not that I can speak on their behalf from what I've read about seeing a Black body with a white woman who was the diamond of that season, and that being, upheld, pedestaled as the relationship, as opposed to seeing a Black man with a Black woman. Like, it's very, that's very, complex and multifaceted. With season 2, it's just, how do I say this? I could just see that they were tokenizing the way that they would have like an Asian descent family over here, the Black queen, and then also, the Sharma family, Edwina and Kate themselves. I'm not someone who uses Twitter, but I'm someone who peruses it. And one of the tweets that I read was about this very thing by someone called Priya. And she says, this is what her Tamil mom said, because I'm not Indian. I don't want to speak like I know more about the culture. So I'd rather quote it from someone else. I mean, I know a little bit, but not enough to kind of, be seen as someone who knows all the ins and outs. I'm loving Bridgerton. This is what Priya's mom says. I'm loving Bridgerton, especially Kate, but why is her last name Sharma if she's Tamil? Why does she say Appa and Amma, but then also Didi? She wears South Indian jewelry, but speaks in Hindi. I don't understand. So these are like facets of authenticity in that culture that have been missed and confused, and it would have taken a very small conversation to clear all that up and make it respectful, instead of kind of doing this mixed up mishmash of all the cultures because we're wanting to represent people who are diverse in color, but who realistically wouldn't have had that kind of standing in the society, even though in the day, even though they gave that a bit of a backstory about the queen. And there's even people who tried justifying it and explaining it. And it's like, yeah, but look at all the work that you've had to do to justify and explain that, when it actually doesn't make sense and it's not correct. It's just not correct, really, for someone to have all those different facets in their language, in their clothing, et cetera, et cetera. And someone else says that the queen is based on a real woman believed to be half Black who had an affinity for corgis and snuff, but her interests probably wouldn't have lain in the realms of like throwing weddings or fighting gossip mongers. And I know that you mentioned gossip, but yeah, just a couple of things that feels like we're doing this to be diverse, but then if you're going to do that, do it properly instead of being I find that disrespectful and incorrect. And And people who of the dominant culture wouldn't even notice a difference.
That's
but if
why I
that's
asked you, because I was like, I have a feeling there's something I'm not seeing here.
Yeah, but if that's who they're doing it for, then that's not the point. I mean, yes, it's great to get people who who aren't what you typically see, to get representation, because representation matters. But then if you're gonna do that, do it properly or respectfully or authentically, or make it clean, make it readable, make it digestible, like logical. Make it make sense.
Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything in particular that you were like, oh, I really wanted to get this across or share this about anything related to the show?
I think just the silver lining, or like a point of difference between your experience and my experience. So I noticed that for me, because of the vile things that Anthony was doing and how they connect to me and what they bring up for me, as I've already shared, it was almost like that was the brake. If you think of a gas pedal and a brake pedal, that was the brake pedal that was overriding any, if brake is turn off and gas is turn on, any turn on that I may have experienced around the kind of the tension and the hot cold and the will they, won't they, was turned off by all of that, what is red flag stuff for me. Very activating trauma response awakening menu. But the place where I felt touched and tender was actually towards the end, when they broke through all of that veneer, all of that bullshit. And here was a person who happens to be a man, declaring his true feelings and a commitment to somebody that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with, whatever. And that is not something that I feel is glamorized or centered enough, but it doesn't happen a lot in this day and age. When I say that, I mean, we live in a world of instant gratification. People change their minds all the time. What commitment means these days is very different to what it used to. And the declaration and the follow through of such a commitment is what tugged at me. And so for me, I find it interesting that it tugged at more romantic, like emotional depth and commitment heartstrings. And I noticed that for you, because you didn't have those breaks coming in, those red flags, that it was that kind of eroticized, or that erotic energetic blueprint connection.
I think this isn't necessarily a commentary, but my favorite scene was the moment when they're in the middle of like, is the wedding going to go through or not? And Lady Danbury and Mama Bridgerton just like lose their shit laughing together.
Why is that?
What's that?
Why is that?
I think there's something about like the crack in their properness. And the like, everything needs to be a certain way and it's not going right, and this is a big problem. And just being able to like find the humor and just a bit of the breakdown in that veneer of properness was delightful to me.
Like they were laughing at the facade that they were having to live out.
Yeah. I enjoyed that. Tell us. I think we have discussed, we've covered some good ground.
We have uncovered the
dear unpopular reader. Dear reader, are you now as equally vexed as we are?
Yes, by this
by the
unpopular
happenings.
opinion station.
Tell us where people can find you, how they can work with you, if they want to get your sight into the dynamics and patterns going on in their own lives. Where can they find you?
Thank you. Such a recognition, such a beautiful recognition of me as a projector. People can find me predominantly on Instagram or buy me a coffee, but predominantly Instagram. My handle is at it's BXOX. And you can, look at what I post there, which is pretty non-linear. Like my rhythm is non-linear in terms of when and how I post. And if you look at the website or the link tree that's linked to my account, you can have a look at what I put up on Buy Me a Coffee on my account there, whether it's curiosity about working with me, posts, etc. I have a few different programs at the moment. I don't know if you want me to list them all, but there's a variety of different ways that people can work with me, either one-on-one or couples, or whether that's, virtually or hands-on, depending on what people are wanting or needing at the moment.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I can also attest that while we've been in the vexed mood for this conversation, you are also working with you doesn't feel so vexing. Being in spaces held by you feels very like there's lots of possibility and space for what is at the same time. So thank you for sharing your insights and your sight and being vexed with me. Can I say vexed one more time?
Vexed. Being vexed with you was a deep pleasure. Rage-gasms for all.
And if you're curious about what she means by rage-gasms, listen back to the I actually meant to check what pronouns are you using these days, because I just said she.
She's fine. I mean, I'm all, any, whatever.
Yeah. So the episode that Bee and I did on emotions, you have to scroll back a bit. I think it might be around number 12 or 13. We go into more about things such as rage-gasms. And if you heard that description about the accelerator or the gas pedal and the brake in terms of what turns you on and what turns you off, Emily Nagoski's book, Come As You Are, is very enlightening and rich. So thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, well done. Your duty has been fulfilled. Just kidding. Don't live your life only according to duty.